we've all had experiences where we're trying to talk about a certain topic, a certain issue that might be a political hot button, such as immigration, especially into the EU at the moment from Middle East and North Africa, as well as sometimes trying to tell people some of the more conspiracy type stuff that you may engage in, or maybe it's been the other way around, maybe they've been telling you something. And what tends to happen typically is that unless you and this other person are already on the same page, it descends into some sort of argument, and that kind of prevents the discussion going any further and may even lead to some other consequences, like people breaking apart relationships and so on. So I'm going to take a little look into that in a moment. So this first began for me, this particular experience, after I'd done a lot of research. I'd been, flawed for months, and I started to see a lot of new things, a lot of different things that I didn't used to see before because I wasn't told about them. And for instance, 9/11 was one. I saw the other side of the argument that, hang on a minute, there's too many inconsistencies in the official story. It pointed them all out. It showed various things, not least the fact that over 1,600 architects and engineers and pilots and other experts, metallurgists and scientists and Lord knows what else, had all come together and said what happened there, those buildings coming down, was not done by aircraft. And the more I looked into it, the more I realised they had a point. And I remember telling my dad this, and it kind of went like this, sort of, Dad, have you seen this? Oh, yeah, they're just conspiracy theories. And then you say, well, they're more than theories. I mean, they've got a point. Oh, yeah, like what? And then you explain something such as, well, jet fuel can't melt steel and all that concrete. And then it comes back, well, yeah, they said that's because it weakened it and then it fell through. All right, what about Building 7 that wasn't hit by a plane? And then there's this, glazed look that you get, because many of these people haven't heard about Building 7 because it's an inconvenient truth. It wasn't hit by anything, and yet it still managed to collapse in its own footprint at free fall speed. And the more evidence, statistics, doesn't matter what that you give, the more sources that you cite, the more video evidence, it doesn't matter what, the angrier and angrier these people become. In this case, my dad. And he became so angry, I remember it, that he was actually screaming at me. And I said, Dad, this is a guy who's been to Oxbridge, Cambridge University in the UK. So he's no idiot. I'm like, Dad, aren't you pleased that, I've used my brain, I've gone out, I've looked at all the evidence, I've listened to the different points of view, I've come to my own conclusion, nobody's told me to think this is what I think based on what everybody's said. And his response was this, well, why don't you go and live in Russia then? That was his response. And this, I couldn't understand it. Why is somebody who apparently doesn't hate me get so angry when what I basically did was prove wrong what he thought? And that's what I think it came down to. It was that his ego, my dad's ego, was dented by the fact that his son, me, had done some research, looked into all the angles, spent a lot of time doing it, because that's all I had was time. When I couldn't move, I was just on the sofa, looking at these things, reading things, listening to things. And it wasn't just 9/11. I mean, this thing goes on and on and on, as those of you who've looked into it know. And then he said to me, this other time, he says, you're just angry that I'm not a truther. He said, and I thought, well, it wasn't me that was angry, it was you. But anyway, and then he said, This was the thing, he said, I wish you'd just focus on the things that matter instead. I wish you'd focus on what's important instead of these silly internet sites. I bet many of them were American, right? These silly American websites. I'm thinking, well, what difference does it make if the website's American, British, or for that matter, Australian? I mean, what does it matter? What matters is what's written. And as far as I think, this is important. This does matter, because it doesn't matter whether you think you've only got 10, 20 years left. But for me, I've got a lot more years left on this earth. And I can see which way it's going, and I don't like which way it's going. And I'm trying to do something about it, and I'm being told, oh, don't worry about that, it's just silly American websites. Focus on what's important. And there was this big hoo-ha, and we didn't speak for months. That's what happened. And this refocused my investigation, if you want to call it that. Rather than looking at any conspiracy that you think of, I stopped looking at them all. And I started looking at more the psychology of it and I guess you could call it the brainwashing aspect. And I started to uncover all these sort of things like Saul Alinsky's book. And then I realised that these politicians, Obama, Clinton, were all into this Saul Alinsky. And I got this book online, an electronic version, and I thought, well, I'll give it a read. And I'll just summarise it in about 30 seconds. Basically, they know they have no point and that they can't win by being honest. They cannot win by being honest, because what they really want is a New World Order totalitarian system that's a bit Orwellian and worse, and they can't be honest. So this book talks about what you've got to do is you've got to keep people confused, and you've got to keep arguing with them and fighting with them. In other words, rather than letting them say, look what you're doing wrong, you don't go there. You just say, you pick apart your enemy. And the book calls it freezing. It's freezing. It freezes the conversation. In other words, the conversation cannot continue because nobody's making any progress, because one person, i.e. the person who's got all the crimes to cover up, is deliberately preventing the conversation from flowing. They are freezing it, and they are freezing the person who's talking to them by just completely redirecting all the time the conversation. You don't answer the question, you redirect, or you may even say something that you're guilty of and put it onto your enemy. In other words, well, I think it's you that's embezzling funds. I think you're the one. And this is complete ludicrousness. But it doesn't matter, because all that matters is now the other guy or lady has got to go on the defensive and defend that they're not embezzling funds. And then the 3 or 4 minute segment is over, and nobody's gotten anywhere. Nobody's any the wiser, and just the confusion. So this was part of what I discovered, and that the media are not only responsible in a large part for that, but they actively promote it by deliberately trying to chop everything up into 2 or 3 minute summaries. And in those 2 or 3 minute summaries, they just keep repeating the same thing over and over and over again, such as we're good and Russia's bad. We're right, they're wrong. We're big, they're small. We're above board, they're devious. And they just repeat over and over and over. And the thing is, many people who like to think themselves as intellectuals and educated, they watch the news, they read the newspapers, they listen to the radio. And what they don't realise, although they maybe would if they were to ask themselves honestly, is that all the media, whether it's newspaper, radio, television, whether it's BBC, CNN, The Times, The Washington Post, they all are saying the same thing. And then they would obviously argue, well, yeah, of course, because it's that they're reporting on the same news, so of course they're going to say the same thing. They're going to word it differently for the different audiences. But you think, well, hang on a minute, what if the owners of these news corporations have an agenda where they're paid. Oh, don't be so silly, they wouldn't do that. And then you say, well, listen to the people who have been in the media, who have come out and blown the whistle and said, that's exactly what's going on. A, they're bribed, they're given money, they're given free goodies, free holidays. B, they're told what to write. In many cases, it's already pre-written. They just want them to sign it off and put it into the paper or whatever. And C, if they don't do this, they're threatened with not just the loss of job, but worse. And one notable guy who said this was from Germany's largest newspaper. The Frankfurter Allgemeine was a senior editor there. And he'd been all around the world on his job writing articles, and he finally had enough. He said, I've been part of this and this false narrative, and I admit it was wrong what I did and what my colleagues do, and we were paid. And he went to explain it. And, well, he died in January this year. I say died because I imagine it was, they say it was a heart attack. The guy was only 50-odd. It could have been a heart attack, but to me... You noticed everybody who comes out and says something either dies of a heart attack, a car accident, or suicide. And if you think that's a conspiracy, I'd say, well, look at the facts, look at how many people have died under one of these three conditions: heart attack, suicide, car crash. And the people who speak out, whether they're speaking for peace and love and harmony, or whether they are trying to point out some inconsistency, or they're a whistleblower. It's alarming how many people end up this way. But the educated people who cannot see this, they're not stupid people. This is what has to... My dad isn't stupid. He really isn't stupid. And so why can't he see it? Well, all right, for 5-6 decades, he's had this constant message repeated at him again and again and again. And say something like immigration. If you even so much as question immigration or how many people are coming into the country, frankly, with very little money, very little education, often ill health, and all these other needs, you are straight away branded as racist by the talking heads at the media. You are racist to even question it. And this is put on show for everybody to see in the media. And of course, somebody told 100 times you're racist to question immigration by 100 different talking heads. These people start to believe that, well, that must be true. That must be right. And I remember years ago, my granddad, my German granddad, being upset at all the immigration into Germany. Before I woke up, and I remember saying, well, these people, they're just coming for a better life. They just want to work, and they don't have the opportunities that you have in Germany, and so they're wanting to, they're just wanting to better themselves and do what's right and do the right. And he was adamant that this wasn't going on. He says they weren't working at all. They were on benefits and they were committing crimes on top of that and this and that. And I thought maybe it was just that he was an older guy and he was maybe a bit racist, and I believed that. And then one day when I turned the news off and I started looking on YouTube, I saw what was going on. Not from the media's point of view, but from real people who were on the ground living in Europe or wherever, and all they had on them was a phone and the ability to upload video onto the internet, onto things like YouTube. This was not filtered, this was not cut out to appear a certain way, this was just a video of what was going on right in front of them. There wasn't even an opinion here, it was just, look at what's happening in my town. This is in front of me. And I thought, oh my God, this is so 180 degrees different from what the media are saying. The media are talking about, well, it's good for the economy, it's good for jobs, these older people be needing care, and I bought into all of that. But then when I realised that, hang on, out of over 1 million immigrants, this is their own media saying this, that less than 100 have gotten a job. Out of over 1 million immigrants, less than 100 have gotten a job. Now, you don't need to be any expert, you don't need to be racist or anti-racist to realise that that isn't going to do the economy a great lot of favours. It just isn't. So, I looked into this a bit further and I realised that what is going on here actually has nothing to do with the immigrants, even though on the surface it has everything to do with the immigrants. Because when I looked further, I realised, why are they leaving their own country? Oh, that's right, because the West, us, and I don't mean us as in you and I mean us as in our elite who control the armed forces, have gone over into these countries and bombed to smithereens these people, these places, these homes, these towns. We've destroyed it. We've destroyed their infrastructure. We've destroyed everything over there. And then we've been doing this since 2001. And then we've gone around systematically, one country after another. Listen to General Wesley Clark, who says this plan was dreamt up days after 9/11, where they were going to go through 7 countries in 5 years under this guise of terrorism and all that. So we've bombed them out of house and home. In many cases, we've killed their family and or friends. Do you think then these people who have got nothing left in their own country all of a sudden are offered a free ticket into the EU, a place that was previously out of bounds for them? Just come in, you'll be given a home, free money, and all the rest. Can you see why they might want to come here? And then, bearing in mind they've watched nothing but and by our I'm talking Western bombs, fall around them for 15 years. And bearing in mind, at least ostensibly, the West is an open democratic society. What that translates into is, if you believe that, we have been voting for leaders for the last 15 years who want to destroy and drop bombs in these countries under the guise of going after terrorism. We haven't done a very good job because we're still there doing it. While at the same time letting all these people into the EU, even though the so-called terrorists, the enemy, said, well, we'll infiltrate the refugees and we'll come and do it at your place. From money that you give us in your benefit system, your healthcare system, on. And while we're doing that, we'll commit crime as well. Can you see why they might be angry when they get here? Because they're seeing you or me or whoever as the person who voted democratically for leaders to go and bomb them lot and kill their family and friends. To me, this is not a difficult leap to make. It's not a difficult concept. It's simple. And so now you've got 2 civilizations pitted against one another. You've got immigrants coming in who think these are the people that are responsible for killing my family and friends because they voted for leaders who just wanted to drop bombs for 15 years. And at the same time, you've got the local population who initially wanted to help these people because they were brainwashed into thinking that these are just people fleeing war, not realising, it's war that you lot are at least funding with your tax. They come in and they're at loggerheads. You killed my family. Well, I'm trying to help you. Yeah, but you killed my family and I'm only getting €100 a week or whatever it happens to be, and you're on more. And so I'm going to smash what you've got just like you smash the stuff that I have. And that's what goes on. Next thing, you've got a divided nation. And you've got the people who are kept away from it, generally the richer people, who are the people who have got the talking heads and the control on the media, saying, Well, anybody who says that they're committing crime is clearly racist and has nefarious agendas. And it's repeated and repeated. The crimes are covered up, as we know that police chief in Cologne said, oh, nothing really happened at New Year's. And then all these people came out on Facebook and said, what the hell are you talking about? Yes, it did happen. And eventually he had to step down and resign for lying. But this is repeated, and we've had these whistleblowers come out and who have said we're told to A, cover up the crimes, and B, not to detain these people, just to let them back out an hour or so later. Why is that? Does that sound like the government cares for its own people, or does it sound like a government who has sold out to some greater entity, I don't know, Council on Foreign Relations, Bilderbergers, central bankers, you name it, and they were told, bring them in and divide your nation, try and destroy it? Because that's what it sounds like to me. And these people are already angry because we've destroyed their place first. This isn't difficult. And once you realise that people are played off against each other, whether it's the German people versus the immigrants, whether it's the Germans who welcome the refugees versus the Germans who are against it, it's all cut up and divided into so many different ways. You've already got the rich against the poor. In some cases, you've got the black against the white. The media keep trying to fan those flames by reporting on every story that makes generally the white guy seem bad and just shot this black guy. But then sometimes they turn it on the police and the police officer was bad. Sometimes the police officer clearly got it wrong and then is completely let off and no charges brought and back on the beat, as it were. And this is, if it seems like it's madness to you, it is madness until you understand what they're trying to do. By they, I'm talking the elite, the same elite that own and control the media. All that they want is A, to sow confusion, and B, division. That's all they're about. Once you understand that all they want to do is divide you up so that you're easier to conquer. Look, it worked between my dad and I. We weren't talking for months. This isn't rocket science. This is how they roll, because a divided house falls. A divided house falls. The West was very strong. You know, America, virtually untouchable. The European Union, equally untouchable. Not 2-3 years after World War II, it was already back into being. Look at Germany after World War II, completely annihilated. Within 5 years, it was the manufacturing powerhouse of the world. It's not difficult for a group of people that just want to get on and try and sort things out to do so. It becomes difficult when they've got meddling, from the top down meddling. They bring out stacks and stacks and stacks of regulations, forms that need to be filled out, certificates that need to be got, and then they keep adding and adding. And what do you think that does to the small and medium-sized business? They cannot keep up with the relentless flow of regulations coming in, while the mega corporations, they can afford an entire department to deal with this. And because of that, these smaller corporations go under. Have you not noticed the small local shops going out of business, and the only ones that remain are the bigger superstores and so on? I mean, this is not difficult. It really isn't. And when people don't get it, it's because they've been programmed for decades. This isn't just something that was dreamt up last week by a couple of evil guys. This has been on the go since World War II, if not before. It really has. I mean, many people say Hitler was killed in his bunker in Berlin at the end of World War II, when he committed suicide and burnt his body. Nonsense. They said that because, think about it, there was no body to be found. Well, how can we have no body? Well, he ordered himself to be burnt so there was no body. All right. But then by the end of 1945, the American intelligence services already knew Hitler was living fine in Argentina and had likely come across on a U-boat. And if you don't believe that, it's on their own website. I believe it's the FBI.gov.us or something. I've looked it up, it is there. Just do a search on Google, it'll take you straight to it. The FBI have declassified the documentation that said Hitler, live and well, in Argentina. He lived out his days there, fine. All these scientists that came across in Operation Paperclip to the US, because it was like a race between America and Russia as to who got the most scientists, who had the most knowledge and the most technology, and whether you believe in this Antarctica thing that some went and hid in a basin there or not, frankly, is almost irrelevant to this story, because what we're getting at here is that these people who had experimented in many cases on prisoners, in the Jews in the camps there, had perfected mind control. They had millions of people to practice on, and they did. Whether they died or not was irrelevant. The point was, how can we push this so that people can be mind... And yes, sometimes that might involve fluoride in the water. I mean, do you think Hitler and these SS types put fluoride in the water into these concentration camps because they gave a damn about the dental hygiene of these prisoners? They're going to cook them tomorrow in the oven. Why would they care about these people's dental hygiene? Come off it. If you believe that, you'll believe anything. The fluoride put into water keeps people more submissive, less likely to rebel. That's it. It's as simple as that. It slows their brain function down cognitively, makes them more passive, more acceptable, more agreeable. And this was none more pointed out than in this African town. They said, well, what would happen if the American forces showed up into this town? This is going back decades now. Well, the people would not give them any... We would go after them in every way we could. When they were sleeping, when they were off guard, we would get them one way or another. We would get them. The Americans thought, all right, something has to be done about this. And the only thing that they did, the only thing to these people, was they modified the food. They put this fluoride into the water. And they modified, genetically modified food or different. And they went in, and these people did nothing. They didn't do anything. All these prior threats from a year or so before, they just didn't mind that there were these foreign soldiers there, and they were taking whatever it was, whether it's oil or poppies, or doesn't matter really, whether it was to set up an airbase, I have no idea. It was just the fact that the only thing that had to be changed was the chemical makeup of the food, what people, you and I, eat and drink every day. We are what we eat. We know this. And so if somebody changes what we eat, even if it's still an apple, yes, we'll have a look. The apple that we eat today has 1/8, in other words, 12% of the vitamins and minerals that an apple had not 100 years ago. That's right. We are only taking in 12% of the vitamins and minerals that we were 70, 80 years ago. Does that explain why so many are sick and disabled today? I dare say yes, together with all these chemicals. And if you've had it on top of that assault, if you want to call it that, an assault against your body, the way that your body works and interacts with your greater self via your brain. You just have somebody telling you, oh, don't think like that because that's bad, that's racist, that's sexist, that's Islamophobic, that's anti-this. It's be progressive. We need to look to the future. Be more positive, be more open, be more accepting, more tolerant. And you have this repeated again and again. Because I want to be a good person. Yeah, well, if you want to be good, you've got to do this. Only bad people think like that. And people go along with it. And when you ask them to explain themselves, they're unable to do so. Why? They don't have facts on their side. They don't have anything on their side because the only thing they've been listening to is empty rhetoric, which is just that. It doesn't need any fact at all. We just got to come up with some slogans. They might rhyme, they might not, and we repeat them again and again. And it's empty rhetoric, which means it's not based in any fact at all, but that doesn't matter. All that matters is people believe it. The media have been doing it for decades. We've all bought into it, and now people are starting to wake up. And it's causing a bit of a division between the increasing numbers of people that are waking up. And at the moment, I still think it's a majority of people that aren't yet awake. And if somebody's awake or awakening, I don't think it ever stops. But if somebody is well on the way to waking up, they would know 9/11 was an inside job. They would know the so-called elite have an anti-human agenda. And they would also know that it doesn't matter how people identify themselves as, whether it's a man, a lady, gay, straight, or any one of these LGBTQ things, whether they're religious for this faith, that faith, whether they have no faith. It's all about division. It's always about division. You'd know that. You'd also know the end game of these so-called elites. They always have to publish what they're going to do, and they always do so either in media, whether it's a film or a television series. They always tell you what they're going to do. They dress it up as fiction. The reason they dress it up as fiction is so that the people who don't realise or have only got a short memory think, oh, it's just a film that. Yeah, but how many films do you have to see that are just a story? Come true, whether it's next year or in the next 10 years. How many times do you have to see it come true until you realise, hang on, all these films keep predicting what's going to happen. They're not predicting anything. It's called predictive programming. They already know what's going to happen because they're planning it. They're just telling you beforehand in the film. Now, some may believe, well, that's so we're more accepting of it. I happen to believe it's to do with this universal law of karma, and they feel that if they tell you what they're going to do and you don't object, you don't do anything about it, then they can go ahead and do it. If you happen to object, then they don't. That's what I believe. And it's only in recent time that people have started to object. And you see all the elite go into panic mode just now, talking absolute nonsense on the news all the time. Why do you think that is? I'll let you into one little secret. The elite already know they've lost. They already know. And this phoenix rising out of the ashes, do you know what that represents? That symbolic icon that you see plastered all over. Because as the elite and their system and everything else is destroyed, there's a few remnants that always remain. It's always the case. And they go underground. And the good people do the right thing and the world gets better again. And this small group of remnants somewhere then get together. They start scheming again. They start going up to no good. And like a phoenix rising out of the ashes in however many years' time, whether it's 10, whether it's 100, whether it's 1,000,000, they come back out. When has any government not turned to tyranny in the history of mankind? When has any nation that has been stable for any length of time eventually not expanded, whether it's in coalition or by themselves, and then tried to take over the world? When has it ever not happened? And I'll give you the answer. Never. And some people think, well, that was how it was, but it isn't like that now. Are you asleep if you think that? What on earth do you think's going on in the Middle East? How many nations has America rolled over with their military in the last 10, 15 years? destroyed, picked apart, and then put in their own so-called government. And then any people who don't like it, well, they're immediately labelled as terrorists. Come on, guys. I'm on your side. I'm on the side of the people. If you're a person, I'm on your side. If you're for destroying people, no, I'm not. But how many people are really just trying to destroy people? And how many people really just want to go on, get along, and try and do more or less what's right? I'll tell you something, that's 90% at least that just want to get along and just keep their head down. But sometimes it's people like that, when there's a lot of wrong going on, that need to stop putting their head down, need to pick it up, have a look round, see what's going on is wrong, and speak out. And sometimes speaking out may cause a bit of aggro. And I'm sure I could have gone around it better with my dad. I could have thought of some other way to present, I guess, my case as to what's going on in the world. Because to come on full frontal where you say, look at what's going on, it's an inside thing, it's a this, it's a that, it overwhelms somebody who is entrained into thinking, no, it isn't, the West is good, it's them over there. That if somebody is entrained like that, believes that, wholeheartedly believes it, you cannot just come and say it's 180 degrees the opposite. It's actually upside down. Because what you're telling them is, no, you've got absolutely everything wrong. And then they think, oh, well, he obviously thinks I'm stupid. No. You've got to come more from the side and say, I don't know, there's got to be some way where you can say, well, imagine if there's a nation, you know, we've heard like China and their education system brainwashes their children and the media then reinforce it. I mean, most of us in the West have all heard this in days gone by, not so much recently, but we used to hear about it all the time. And so, yeah, we know that. And I'd say, well, what if our education system or our media were either wittingly or unwittingly doing the same here? Would we know any better than those kids in China know? And would we grow up knowing any better than those people growing up in China know? Would we? My argument is no, we wouldn't, because we're people just the same as they are. We've been suppressed just the way as they have. There's got to be some way where you can talk to somebody who's completely under the spell, completely brainwashed. The type of person that thinks Trump's the worst thing ever and Hillary was God's gift to the world. That sort of a... Whoever thinks that, I mean, against all the evidence and facts that's available, is under some sort of a spell. Let's make no illusion, they are under some sort of mind control spell. And that mind control and spell involves getting angry at anybody who challenges that belief. Whether they've got facts or not is irrelevant. That's the spell. And we need to think of some way of breaking that spell rather than breaking up the relationships, because that spell is, in my opinion, the only thing that stops us from defeating this enemy overnight. Because without that spell, we could all come together, we could put what we know on the table, and we wouldn't have to argue. We'd just say, well, I think this, you think that. All right, why do you think that? Because here's why I think this. We could talk about it, discuss it. We don't have to agree on everything. The only thing we have to agree on is, more or less, who's the good guy and who's the bad guy. And we define good and bad not by who shares our religious belief or who's the same skin colour as us. We define that by who is for bettering of people. You know, who's for increasing the equality and happiness of all, not just a few. That's where we want to be, and we want to paint those people as the good people. The people who advocate against that, the people who are pro-war, pro-division, pro-bombing things to death, pro-indebting as many people as possible so they can run away with all the money. That's the people who we need to paint as the enemy. And that's all there is to it. Take care, guys. I want you all to have a good day if it's in the morning. Have a good evening if it's evening. And sleep well if it's night. Bye-bye, everybody. Take care.